Not too long ago, I finished reading volumes 1 and 2 of Mouse by Spiegelman, and I'm actually really glad that I read it. It's definitely not something that I would have picked up on my own, but if I could only pick one graphic novel that I have read so far this year, it would be Mouse. One of the things that I found most interesting was Spiegelman's use of animal metaphors that he used to represent different groups of people. The Jewish were mice, Germans cats, Polish pigs, American dogs, and the Swedes were deers with horns, and there were two other, while I don't think they were actually seen, the gypsies were said to be butterflies and the French were frogs. At first, when I first heard about this book and the metaphors, I was like, okay, I guess that makes sense. But as I was reading, I wasn't seeing the whole picture and the real reasoning behind his choices. And honestly, I was a little bit upset that I didn't think about it sooner. And it took me scrounging through the internet for his interviews and breakdowns of the book to completely see its purpose. Which I think is something that I should mention because I'm usually too prideful to admit when I don't understand things, especially when it comes to literature. So I thought that was really interesting. So here's what I found during my deep dive. Turns out I wasn't too far off with my original thinking, and that the Jews were discriminated and essentially hunted down by the Germans in World War II, sort of like how cats will chase and kill a mouse. But apparently there was a lot more to it than that, seeing as how cats and mouse aren't the only predator-prey duo out there. Not only were these metaphors used to reflect the absurdity of racism, but it also created understandable symbolism throughout the book. That didn't clarify why he chose the animals that he did, though. At first glance, the Polish as pigs made the most sense to me, seeing as it came from a historical stereotype, but the Jews as mice didn't quite click until I found one of Spiegelman's interviews that explains that he had chosen to make the Jews mice after finding out that the gas used in the gas chambers back then was Zyklon B, which is actually a pesticide used to get rid of rats and mice from crops, which I guess represents how the Jews were seen as vermin, not my words, his words, not mine, by the people at the time. And after figuring out why Jews were mice, I didn't think it was too hard to connect why the Germans were seen as cats instead of any other predator out there. I mean, what do farmers use in their barns when they have a vermin problem that they can't use pesticides for? They get multiples of barn cats. From my opinion, this painted a specific picture, one where the Jews were at a definite disadvantage. I mean, I've never heard stories of mice killing a cat. And even when I tried to look up stories, or even how many mice would be needed to kill a cat, the majority of the results only responded by telling me how many mice a cat could eat in a day. Seeing Spiegelman's metaphor, I think, really put things into perspective for me. When I was younger and I first learned about what happened during the Holocaust, I didn't understand why the Jews didn't rebel or why they couldn't hide their religion. Of course, this was just childhood ignorance from the barely glanced at learnings that they gave to save the innocence of younger kids and children. And while I've long since understood why that wasn't plausible, Mouse has given me a better perspective on what happened and the people that it affected than the Who Was Anne Frank book that I had to read in 4th grade. For me personally, his metaphor created a picture of anxiety and fear, much similar to when you watch like documentaries of prey running and hiding from different predators at each turn, just as the people his father and other Jews thought they could trust turned them over and or blatantly lied to them about their intentions, putting them in danger and at risk. Reading this book has definitely given me a lot to think about, and there's a lot more things that could be said about this topic. But I think this is where I'm going to end my podcast for today. So, signing off, Ken.